Let me introduce our first presenter. That's Hoth Therapeutics. The stock symbol is HOTH on NASDAQ. And Hoth is developing a pipeline of drugs targeting really multi-billion-dollar opportunities in eczema, psoriasis, chronic wound disorders, and acne. What's interesting is Pfizer, recently paid about $5 billion for a company that's kind of a peer to Hoth. So that's that which makes this story very compelling. But here to tell you more about what Hoth is all about, where the company is going, and why you should be interested in the stock is the CEO, Robb Knie. Robb, I'm going to turn over to you.
Hi, Jack. Thank you so much for having me today.
Okay, Robb, you're on.
Okay, let me just make this full screen so everybody could see it. So is our corporate presentation 2019, our disclaimer, as you can see, and obviously this presentation is on our website as well for investors and others to see as well. So Hoth is a biopharmaceutical company with our main focus being on unique therapeutics for patients suffering from dermatological issues such as atopic dermatitis or eczema. We're working to develop and commercialize the BioLexa platform. BioLexa is more than just the one drug, one trick pony only for eczema. We believe we'll be able to use BioLexa for other dermatological needs as well. We licensed the drug that was developed at the University of Cincinnati. We had a preclinical study at the University of Miami, which showed some really good results in a mini pig study, which I'll later show that slide. We also have an exclusive license from University of Maryland, Baltimore for an option for a drug called VNLG-152, which is for psoriasis and acne. Also have an exclusive license from University of Cincinnati for a genetic marker for food allergy and eczema. We've also announced recently a strategic agreement with a company called Xylo Pharmaceuticals to develop a drug for lupus sufferers of dermatological needs. We're working with Xylo right now for further clinical studies for a reconfirmation study later this year, early next year, for results that were shared out of Albert Einstein University in New York. And our final pipeline drug is from George Washington University, an exclusive option for that as well. And that's for sufferers of skin ailments when going through chemotherapy. So that is our current pipeline. Just to give you a little bit of idea of the defined pathway that we're working on. It's a big addressable market for atopic dermatitis, which is the first drug we'll try human clinical trials for. What we're doing is, since it's a combined drug of gentamicin, which has been around quite a while, and a DTPA chelator, we're taking those two drugs, combining them together to actually treat the underlying illness of atopic dermatitis. Many of the current treatments that are available for sufferers of eczema or atopic dermatitis are corticosteroids, which show thinning of the skin and have quite a few side effects, as well as different biologics that might be injections and such. We're going after the pediatric market, which is atopic dermatitis or eczema for adolescents and pediatrics. We think this is one of the most sought after areas for pharma to try to show a different effect of atopic derm and curing it, or if not curing it, treating it better than the standard care of corticosteroids and such. What we're doing is going after the actual underlying ailments, which is Staph aureus. Staph aureus is what's really present in atopic dermatitis. And the way our drug works, BioLexa works, is that DTPA chelator sucks up all the zinc and is able to then clear away where the actual illness is taking place in the skin, and the gentamicin gets in there to then clear the atopic derm or eczema. So the patient is not only relieved of his symptoms, but actually of the actual atopic derm itself. The treatments that are out there today really deal with the inflammation and the itch only. So stop the itching, thus the redness goes away, and you've kind of cleared atopic derm, but it's still underlying there. You're just treating the symptoms rather than treating the root cause, which is most likely Staph aureus in most cases. We think we're rather unique. We're not using corticosteroids like most are. We're not using a biologic or injectable like most are. We're using a simple cream. So we think that cream or lotion, as it might be, will have better compliance for patients as well. Here's our current pipeline. As you can see, we have that proposed phase 1/2, which will take place in Australia next year. We'll start enrollment for that early next year, we believe. And what we're doing by doing it in Australia, we're actually taking a page out of the playbook of Anacor and Pfizer of a drug called Eucrisa, where they kind of de-risked their program and did the study in Australia. It's cheaper. It's transferable in most cases to the FDA. You get a rebate back from the Australians, so it costs less. And we're able to go right into the adolescent pediatric market rather than doing adults first. Dermatology offers very attractive returns and exits. As Jack mentioned, Pfizer acquired a company called Anacor for $4.9 billion. Anacor Pfizer drug is called Eucrisa. It showed efficacy and safety. Safety was great. Efficacy in about 35% of patients. What we think is kind of unique and different is one of the problems with Eucrisa is when you put it on the skin, there's lots of burning. So imagine putting that on a child. It burns the first time, and then try to apply it the second and third time. You're chasing the child around the house who might not want to have that burning feeling. That's the biggest side effect of Eucrisa. So we think ours will be kind of unique. Like I said, we're not only treating the symptoms, we're treating the root cause. And it's a non-steroidal, which parents are most concerned about. You don't want to put corticosteroids on a child if you don't have to. Talk a little bit about the platform itself. Once again, non-corticosteroid approach, going after those biofilms that we talked about. We're trying to prevent those symptoms and prevent the flare-ups. So there's lots of different treatments out there, as I mentioned, the corticosteroids, OTC moisturizers, oatmeal baths, trying to avoid different irritants, even bleach baths for children. So imagine putting your child in a bleach bath to try to clear the eczema itself. It's not only a physical disease for these children, but there's also mental components to eczema because kids don't want to go to school because of the red marks on their face or body, wherever it might be. So there's that other element that we think is so important in helping clear atopic. Talk a little bit about Staph aureus making up 20% of the bacteria on the skin and 40% on lesions, and how important it is to go after that Staph aureus that we mentioned. Here's kind of how it works here. The biofilms that are produced, and they start these colonies, and these colonies then attack the immune system, making this bacteria really resistant to anything. So the way that GTPA chelator works, it's a chelator that it goes after those biofilms and sucks it all up, so the gentamicin then can go and fight that existing bacteria. We're using the lowest measurable amount of gentamicin. We think that's very important. When we had our pre-IND meeting with the FDA, they asked if there was a lower percentage of gent. There's no lower percent that we could, measure reliably. So we're using the lowest amount. So we think that's very important because we don't hit up against that antibiotic resistance that some folks would talk up. Here's our mini pig results. You could see how, the gent or the GTPA alone does not work the way the combination works best. Whoops, excuse me. And you can kind of see that it reduced the bacteria below the LOQ, which this study was done at Miller School of Medicine at University of Miami and done by Dr. Stephen Davis. So we think this is a really powerful study that showed how well this drug works. So we're also going after the wound disorder business. We kind of think this is another element that shows how BioLexa can work in other areas. And we've done a diabetic foot ulcer study at Mass General that showed really good efficacy on our mouse study. And we'll continue to do another study at Mass General later this year, another pilot. We think this might be an opportunity for licensing BioLexa for these chronic wound disorders to another pharma. So big market opportunity. Jack touched on this. 32 million patients have a mild to moderate eczema, where we're going after $9.5 billion U.S. market opportunity. There's also the aesthetic dermatology, where we think BioLexa could be used to improve healing and improvement of cosmetic outcomes. That's another $2 billion a year market opportunity. We talked about those chronic diabetic foot ulcers that we're working on. Talk a little bit about VNLG-152 that we licensed from University of Maryland, Baltimore. So there's about 7.5 million people affected by psoriasis alone in the U.S. Tremendous opportunity for us to go after. And we think acne, there's not anything new that's really been introduced in the acne space in quite a long time. We think these lead retinoids, these rhombas, have demonstrated really good effects in vitro, and we'll be doing a mouse study later this year. Matter of fact, we just received our first shipment of VNLG from University of Maryland, Baltimore, Dr. Najjar's lab, and we'll be setting up a later pilot study for that. Most likely late 2019, 2020. Talk about our investment highlights. We're a unique small cap specialty pharma. We're going after this multi-billion-dollar market opportunity. Proprietary platform. We've got quite a few patents for BioLexa and VNLG-152. We've got a great scientific team we put together, including Dr. John Zippin, Vice Chair of Weill Cornell's dermatology area. Also, Dr. Larry Schachner, former head of pediatric dermatology at University of Miami. Dr. Andrew Herr, the inventor of BioLexa out of University of Cincinnati. So and I'd also like to mention Dr. Adam Friedman, who is helping head up our Therapeutics joint agreement for lupus sufferers. So once again, a unique team, unique assets, very good patent position, and a multi-billion-dollar market. And we're looking to start that Australian trial, which have readout in 2020 for atopic dermatitis. I'd like to open up the forum for any questions.
Okay, Rob, thank you. That was great. I'm going to, again, anybody who has questions, please send them in. I have 3 questions that came in last night or this morning before the presentation. Okay, so 3 questions. The first one is, Steve asks, what is the realistic timeline for commercialization? I'm not sure which product, but that's, I guess,
we'll probably BioLexa because we're closest to human trials for that. So the BioLexa trial, like I spoke of, the phase 1/2 that we look to do in Australia will be next year. We'll take that data after you receive that. We'll do about 80 patients in Australia, those pediatric patients. We start enrollment, start the trial itself. It's a 28-day regimen where patients will be receiving BioLexa, most likely twice a day. As I mentioned, it's a lotion cream. We'll get readout on that in 2020, then take that data to the FDA and look for our next trial, whether it's a reconfirmatory phase 2 or phase 3. That's kind of up in the air with the FDA, dependent on those results. Usually it could be a 7-year time frame for commercialization. We think we'll be much quicker than that, based on the fact that these are 2 approved drugs combined. So our goal is to, once we have this data, try to find the right partner for us to help us commercialize that.
Okay. Next question, Christina is asking, what is cost difference? What is basically she's asking, what is the cost difference between getting the approval in Australia versus US? Getting, I guess, in Australia first and then getting the US.
Right. So you're actually doing the study in Australia, but you're using that data to go back to the US for FDA approval. So you're taking that data from your phase 1/2, say, that you do in Australia. That study then goes to the FDA, and the FDA gives you, okay, this is transferable. You went through the FDA guidelines, but doing it in Australia, then you could take that data, we can give you a yes to go on to the next phase of the trial. So you're still going for the actual approval itself in the US first.
Okay. Okay, last question, or let me see, last one from last night, I should say, is a question from Paul. He's asking, what was the difference between the Pfizer deal, which was the $5 billion acquisition, and where Hoth is today?
So Pfizer had Anacor had human data when that was bought out. We're currently going into human trials next year. So when we have our human trials next year, and based on the data, and all drugs are different on how they go after the atopic dermatitis. So what we're thinking is, based on our current mini pig study, based on the tox studies that we're currently doing, we'll go into that trial in 2020, get some readout next year on our data, and we'll see how that data looks on the scale for treating mild to moderate atopic derm in pediatrics and adolescents. Will give us our next, whether we go into a phase 2 again in the U.S. or phase 3. So we're in a little bit of a different place than where they got bought out. So once we get that human data, we think will be much more valuable.
Okay, great. Let me see if we have any questions from the audience again. Okay, last chance for questions. Anybody wants to send it in? Okay, I think that's
Thanks,
it for the questions. Rob, thank you again, and we look forward to having you back with some new updates in a few months.
Thanks, Jack. You have a great day.